Hawaii. This is Poka Lainui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri on radio station KWAI 1080 on your AM dial. Welcome to the program. Welcome back to the program. In the earlier hour, we had talked about the Hawaiian Roll Commission, and I was explaining why I do not believe it is pono or appropriate, and that the Aha Hawaii Oiwi, that Native Hawaiian convention in which Native Hawaiians had been elected to those positions as representative of the Hawaiian community, was a more appropriate process in which that convention had been preparing both an independence model and an integration model, very similar to the Akaka approach, to be presented to the Hawaiian people before they were able to conclude their work. The state legislature as well as the Office of Hawaiian Affairs refused to fund the completion of their work, and after a few years then jumped in and created this Hawaiian Roll Commission, which directs the Hawaiian people only into an integrationist approach. And because of that, I am of the belief that it is not the appropriate thing to do, and if people ask me, should I register with the Hawaiian Roll Commission, I would not encourage their registration. Okay, if you would like to call and share an opinion on that matter, our telephone number here is 524-1080. We'll give you an opportunity to share your opinion as we discuss these many other things that has been occurring in Hawaii and in other parts of the world over the last week. Another item that comes to my attention is this case against some organizations that have been said to be practicing slavery, and the federal government has brought up a number of charges against a number of people. We saw last year against the Aloun brothers, who have been farming their Aloun farms and producing a lot of agricultural products. They had been accused of participating in this practice of slavery, and eventually the federal government dropped the cases because they came to a position where they were not able to prove their case. In fact, what had happened was a lead counsel, I think it was, from the federal, it may have been a strike force attorney, who very very interestingly, very surprisingly, did not show up in court, could not be found, flew back to Washington, and the case was dismissed. The Aloun brothers were declared not guilty, and the cases were dismissed with prejudice, meaning that they cannot be brought back for trial. In that case, originally the Aloun brothers had pled guilty, not wanting to face the long and trying period of defending themselves, and thought that, okay, they would just go ahead and plead guilty. And it was quite clear that they weren't all that familiar with the practice of law or the process of law, or someone could say they were very familiar with it and couldn't afford and didn't want to go through that whole process. The judge, I think it was Mulway, refused to accept the guilty plea after examining them and finding that there was no sufficient factual basis that they were admitting to, that she could really find them guilty based on their plea of guilty. So she rejected the plea, forced the government to go to trial, and the government was not able to prove its case. Now, the government continued with the case, prosecuting others who were sort of associated with them. And in the Aloun case, the government, I believe, stipulated to the dismissal of the case, and the judge said, and this dismissal will be with prejudice. Now we hear that Global Horizons Incorporated, which had also been accused of human trafficking with Thai workers, has been the case against them has been dropped, and it reads by Nelson Daranciang, of the Star Advertiser, the federal government dismissed its human trafficking case Friday against the owner and employees of a labor contracting company accused of victimizing 600 workers it imported from Thailand to work on farms in Hawaii and other U.S. states. In their request to the court to drop the case, federal prosecutors said based on the state of the available admissible evidence, they have determined that they are not likely to prevail in proving their case and that continuing with the prosecution no longer serves the public interest. Charges were dropped against California-based Global Horizons Incorporated, owner Mordecai Yosef Orion, company employees Prani Tubchumpo, Ratawan Chun Harutal, and Joseph Noller, and Thai labor recruiter Punjani Sinchai. Trial was scheduled for next month. 3 other former Global Horizon employees, Shane Germain, Bruce Schwartz, and Sam Wogensonet, I think that's how you pronounce it, who had pleaded guilty and were expected to testify in the trial, will be allowed to withdraw their guilty pleas and have the charges against them dropped. It was the second high-profile human trafficking case federal prosecutors have dismissed in Hawaii in the past year. In August, the government dropped its case against brothers Alex and Mike So of Alun Farms after their trial had started. The request to dismiss the Global Horizon case, signed by Department of Justice Civil Rights Division Attorney Daniel Weiss, said that in October 2011, in light of the Alun Farms dismissal, government lawyers reviewed the evidence and conducted an additional investigation of the case. Based on that investigation, they decided to dismiss the case. As in the Alun Farms case, the government will not be able to refile charges against the Global Horizon defendants. And the story continues. This is found at Star Advertiser Section B, page B1. It's the lead case. It's very interesting to see that the government, not being able to prove its case, then finally decides to drop the case. In the meantime, they have destroyed reputations, they have destroyed employment, they have destroyed these organizations or these businesses simply by carrying on with their accusation and then dragging out these trials. And this, according to Michael Green, attorney for Mordecai Yosef Orion, that while the charges have been dropped, it's merely a moral victory because the client has essentially lost everything. What a sad comment to find this to be the case, where the federal government proceeds with these cases and are not able to complete its action. What it should be doing is paying more attention to the real criminals that have been running around in this society, and that is the likes of George Bush, of his henchmen, his vice president, his secretary of state, and others who should be charged and prosecuted for their criminal activities. Instead, and very unfortunately, Barack Obama has not had the intestinal fortitude to go ahead with those prosecutions. He's using this excuse that I don't want to look into the past, I only want to look into the future. Well, with that kind of statement, that kind of logic, then there is no such thing as a criminal offense, because all criminal offenses are offenses of the past that needs to be corrected and needs to be prosecuted so that you can move into the future. But to say that we are only looking into the future, not into the past, then there's no such thing as a criminal law, because whatever had happened in the past that were crimes are not to be prosecuted. That's an idiot's approach to the exercise of the prosecutor's powers, executive branch's powers. Okay, that's my opinion. Now I invite your telephone calls. Telephone number here is 524-1080, and you're invited to share your views. And since I'm not getting any calls, I will continue with my views on some of these other matters. Now, many of you have heard about Bain Capital and who's that? Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is saying, hey, wait a minute, I wasn't at the head of Bain Capital. I didn't sign any documents to outsource jobs or to push organizations into foreclosure. I was not at the head, or I was not the executive officer at that time, although he files with the SEC saying that he was indeed the chief executive officer as well as the sole owner and the rest. So anyway, out comes this guy by the name of Poka Lainui, and he writes to the Washington Post the following article, which about 60% of the beginning of the article will be published, or we anticipate will be published. At least that is a response from the editors of the Washington Post. The central point should not be whether or not Mitt Romney exercised the power of authority and control over Bain Capital during the years from 1999 to 2001. The question is whether or not he allowed at Bain Capital a culture of business practices which outsourced American jobs or participated in pushing entities toward bankruptcy. As to that, one need not have, quote, pulled the trigger himself, but to have permitted such business culture to develop over the years. The leadership one has over an organization or over a nation stems not from any singular decision or action, but is an accumulation of influences found in discussions, approvals, policies, appointments of lower leadership, and broad influence over the direction of such organization or nation. Such is responsible leadership and being held accountable for actions taken under one's charge. Okay. So this is with regards to Bain Capital, and that seems to be a continuing issue. They're trying to avoid the issue now, saying it's not really relevant. I think it's absolutely relevant in the run-up to the American presidential election. I have been, and you will note, I have been very critical of Barack Obama and his administration and its failure to prosecute those war criminals. And I am also critical of Mitt Romney and his dealing with his claim of uninvolvement or lack of involvement with regards to Bain Capital. It's hogwash as far as I'm concerned. Your opinions are welcome. Our telephone number here is 524-1080. And now we come to the issue of the mayor's race, and it's impossible to divide the mayor's race from the issue of rail, it seems. This comes from letters to the editor out of the Honolulu Weekly. This one is written by John Kawamoto of Honolulu, Hawaii. Honolulu mayoral candidates Peter Carlisle and Kirk Caldwell are using insinuation and innuendo to discredit candidate Ben Cayetano. I tell you what, since we do have a caller in, and I assume it's not going to be on the issue of rail, but it may be on an earlier subject, let me go to our caller, and we'll handle that first before going into another subject. All right, aloha caller. Thank you for calling. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Poka. How are you? This is Michael.
Yes, aloha, Michael.
Aloha. Actually, I wanted to try to address a few things that have been presented on your show today.
Okay, go ahead.
First, I found the discussion with you and the first caller to exemplify the sort of respectful and dignified processing to help get clarification. And we certainly need more of that, I think, in our society. So thank you and the first caller for that.
Yes, you're welcome.
Secondly, I want to suggest that if we define what is a healthy society, one might say part of a healthy society is looking at the contradictions that exist within a society and how these contradictions conflict with espoused values and principles. I think I've been in Hawaii for about 23 years and am still just a novice in learning about Native Hawaiian culture, which is making me a better person as I do. And the notion of pono, or right way of behaving, seems to fit principles that are part of the United States tradition, most clearly from a gentleman named Dr. Martin Luther King, who talked about the need to resolve contradictions in what is espoused for racial equality and the actual segregation at his time of life.
Yes.
You pointed to a number of contradictions that would lead our society not to realize optimal health. One is the contradictions in Barack Obama, who instead of putting principles or notions of pono first, he puts politics. And that will contribute to an unhealthy society. You also talked about the contradictions between addressing some issues, but not addressing the unlawful actions that George Bush, his vice president, and members of his cabinet have inflicted so much death and misery in Iraq and Afghanistan. Never been resolved. But I guess I'm very interested in the contradiction of the earlier topic you discussed that was in the paper today, and I'm so grateful that I listened to the show today because I scanned the article real quick, didn't quite understand the significance, and this show has really helped clarify it. I believe that there is a growing number of persons who are American citizens who take Dr. King's challenge to transform our values and to resolve contradictions. And if he were alive today, I would suggest that he would be an advocate of Native Hawaiians to have their nation restored. Not a nation within a nation, but a nation unto itself. That's all hypothetical. But I would say, as far as my understanding of history, the contradictions are blatant in terms of the illegal action in this land. And I think I'm not alone. It may not be a lot of white people in Hawaii. But I know that there are some who take the stand that I have, is that it's real important to support in whatever way we can the restoration of an independent nation, and then to look at what that means in terms of creating even a better society than we have now. I'm not sure what steps can be taken, and perhaps at some time off the air I could talk to you more in detail. But I am sure that the issues you're raising and the rogue commission is an accurate term. And if we fail, and I say we being people of principle who strive to live pono, we are going to perpetuate a serious contradiction that violates our fundamental values. And that will contribute to the sort of insanity that is inherent in our society. And if I can go out on a limb here, would say that that sort of unhealthy societal condition in some way contributes to the ongoing epidemic of violence in society, including the hard to understand phenomena in Colorado.
Yeah.
So I will be glad to listen to you. I have a little bit of time, and if there's anything I can respond or add to, or I could take it off the air, whichever is better for you.
Well, why don't you take it off the air? I think first I got to process this whole concept that you're trying to introduce. And I'm going to take it from a different direction and then hope to bring it to this point of contradiction. Call back if you want to.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for raising the subject. Aloha.
Bye-bye.
And wow, what a broad and yet so fundamental question as the contradictions that we face in the society. And then ending it with what had happened in Colorado in terms of actual conduct. Some could say at this point, not understanding the issues or what went through that young man's mind, which eventually turned into this violence, this craziness from our point of view, and how we could stretch our thoughts into, well, it could have been contradictions within the society. But there is at least an approach. I want to share a theory with you that we follow and see where that goes. If, and many of you may have heard me talk about this previously, if you take a triangle and you put at the very top of that triangle, in terms of, let's call it the ABC triangle, at the top of the triangle you put the letter B. At the bottom of the left corner of the triangle, you put the letter A, and on the right corner of the triangle, so at the legs of the triangle, the base of the triangle, you put the letter C. The question that we oftentimes face is, what causes B to become B? What causes behavior to result in what it has resulted in? And we who are involved in, let's say, the mental health arena, or in trying to project conduct or behaviors of people, even in the legal area, we're always taking a look at B, behavior. And you can split that B into two sections. One is direct conduct, the violent conduct, the shooting, the stabbing, the beating up, the craziness that goes on, that is exposed very publicly. And below that, you can put the indirect violence, the indirect behavior, the teasing, the nagging, the accusations, the ill will that is expressed. It can be expressed in the very broad public, or even within families or among couples. This type of violence that may occur. Some people will classify the violence, one as more masculine and the other feminine. The man just tends to strike out because he's continually being nagged by the wife. So he beats the wife up, and then he's the one who is accused of creating the violence, while the behavior may have been instigated by the more effeminate approach of nagging, of teasing, of scolding, and of doing that kind of stuff. But it's still behavior. I'm looking at the time, and I'm seeing that I'm being asked by my producer to take a break. So let's go to a break, and we'll come back to this ABC triangle of peace and violence.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii, kupa ama hope o ka aina, iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, pala pala anunu me ka paka.